in the world of, I guess, asset seizure slash forfeiture, there's a huge difference when the government has to stake a claim to get something versus when they already have it and then you have to sort of petition to get it back. So right now we're in a situation where the attorneys for Michael Miske have to, I guess, petition to get the seized assets back. Is that correct?
Well, I'm not really sure. So practically speaking, because we're talking about such a large amount of assets, I don't really know if a court is going to be willing to return all of those assets to Michael Miske's representative. Well, first of all, it's not clear to me that he has one, right? So all of this was being held in trust.
Hmm.
So what that means is that the successor trustee is now the person that represents Michael Miske. That successor trustee needs to hire a different lawyer, basically, to make a claim that these assets should now be put in the possession of the Michael Miske Trust. I haven't seen that happen yet. All we see right now is a forfeiture action filed by the government.
Do you think maybe there's information that we don't know about when it comes to the trust? Do you think he had this lined up? Because my impression of him was he was detail oriented and had things like this dialed in.
Well, I think what happened was during the criminal trial, the AUSAs were able to connect each of the assets to criminal activity. And so
Hmm.
the 12 jurors found beyond a reasonable doubt now, right? Beyond a reasonable doubt in the criminal trial that the assets were in fact connected to illegal activity, which allowed them to forfeit the assets in the criminal case. It's important to note now, though, in the civil forfeiture action, the burden of proof for the government is much less. It's preponderance of the evidence. So while we're going through this exercise of, repeating the criminal trial, the government has a much lower burden of standard, lower burden of proof that it needs to follow. Is it more likely than not that these assets were tied to illegal activity? And that's all they have to prove. If they were able to prove it to 12 jurors beyond a reasonable doubt, I don't see why they're not going to be able to prove it to less than 12 jurors in a civil case by preponderance of the evidence.
Hmm.
That's the question. So, I mean, I hear you. I hear that, there's a position that he was doing illegal things and that's how he initially came up with the money. But based on the verdict by the 12 jurors, it seems like he was continuing to do illegal activity and that those assets were specifically tied to criminal activity.
Yeah, I guess the umbrella term criminal activity to me, I almost feel like if you were to kind of be a surgeon and dial in specifically the the things that he owned and directly connect them to the sale of drugs or some sort of illegal activity. I almost feel like as a blanket or an umbrella term, yeah, I guess you could kind of say that because of all the things about Michael Miske as, the biggest crime boss in Hawaii for since I won't say, but probably the biggest crime boss in the last maybe 20, 25 years, something like that. But then part of me also knows a little bit about him, has researched a little bit about him, and I feel as though just as there's that part that the government proved, there's also the part where, I mean, Kama Aina termite made him a millionaire. He's making probably several $100,000 a month, you know what I mean? Through the legitimate contracts and services rendered through Kama Aina pest control. That club that he had was the hottest club for a few years, right? And
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
yeah, in that world, I haven't been out doing, the whole bottle service thing, but I remember people spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on a night on alcohol, and the people working there are walking away with hundreds of dollars in tips, sometimes over $1,000. You like the bottle service girls and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, man, it's hard for me to imagine him not being able to counter with legitimate records of contracts signed and work rendered and revenue and cash on hand through banks